What's up YouTube, and welcome back to Homebrew Subaru. In this episode I'm going to make this Impreza start and run. So what's up everyone? In this video I'm going to try and finalize this EJ253 non-AVLS block with AVLS heads and get it back into the 2011 Impreza. I've gotten the timing idler that I was waiting on to get the timing belt all together, get everything else back onto the engine that I want, slam it back into the car, and hopefully turn the key and make it run. So that's where we're going to start. I'm going to get the timing belt on, turn this thing over, make sure everything's good, and then get things moved around in here so that can get that thing in. Picking up right where I left off, I'm ready to put the new idler on, got the belt. Once I have everything on, I'll pull the tensioner and I'll give everything a spin, make sure there's no problems and no contact and everything lines back up. Then I'll get ready to put the covers back on. So I've got everything together and I've gone to give it a spin and it seems like I have valve contact. So I ended up pulling the plugs just to make sure I had no resistance and wasn't feeling compression, and I pulled the one cover off. I don't see the issue, but this thing does not want to turn over. Well, I've spent about 20 minutes just reading online, going through all the forums and threads that I was reading, about people doing this, and I really can't find any conflicting issues that people had putting AVLS heads on a non-AVLS block. Now, from what I know, 2005 is kind of an odd year, so I don't know if it's got a different set of pistons or what might be going on, but what I've determined is for some reason bank 1's exhaust valves are touching. So I can rotate one way, and as I get this mark down to here, the number 1 exhaust valves touch, and then I decide, whatever, I'm just turning this thing, I'll crank it backwards, and when I get this mark down to about down here, number 3 exhaust valves touch. So when I'm spinning the other way, number 2 and 4 exhaust valves clear. So in my mind, that just doesn't make any sense at all. I really don't understand how that could happen. I've double checked the sprockets. I know these are the old ones off the 2005, and I do have the 2008s on there. I've double checked the crank sprocket. I don't know. I'm gonna have to do a little bit more reading, a little bit more thinking before I make the decision to actually pull these heads again. I mean, I can use the non-AVLS heads. It's just the car won't have AVLS, obviously, and I can't reuse these head gaskets, so I'll have to order some new ones if I'm going to do that. But if this ain't going to work, it's just not going to work. So kind of have to come to that decision and then go from there. So I decided to start with taking the belt back off, turning everything to, well, lining up the marks. It's not really top dead center, but so that the pistons are into the block, and I come to this head because I know it's the issue, and I mean it starts to spin, but well, I mean I released it on the springs there, I shouldn't have, but it doesn't want to turn past that point. I'm not forcing it at all, but there's something going on with this side. And I did have the AVLS off, like the actual shaft, but I know I've got the spring retainers all back in properly. But I'm going to start taking that off just to have a camshaft inspection. So I did locate the problem. It's behind the camera right now, but when I was putting this shaft assembly back on, obviously one of these keepers or pins jumped back out. They're actually spring loaded, and they have to be relatively lined up with the other one, or they will potentially pop out on you. And that's the way it looks over here. Kind of hard to see without the light, but you kind of see how that one's just sitting in against the arm. And if it moves a little bit too far, it can be shot out of there. And what's holding up is the pin is actually down there in the camshaft lobe. So it's starting to push up against it, and that's why the cam won't turn. Problem solved. All right, I got this thing all back together. I got the covers on, crank pulleys on, everything's tightened up. Got the valve covers back on. New oil filters on with some oil in it. So this thing is ready to drop back in at this point. I'm just cleaning up this table and getting rid of some of the tools so that I can move the crane in front of the car, dump it in there. And last week it was rain. This week it's snow. So I will say that working alone isn't always the easiest thing to do, but the more and more you do it, the easier these things go. So even just getting that engine from over here to here, past this leg, and kind of, you know, I've got this raised floor here that I got to deal with. There's a bunch of things I have to think about in order to make this happen easily without killing myself. But it is always possible, and you know, if you've got the right equipment and take your time, think about what you're doing, you aren't going to hurt yourself, and you're going to get it done without getting so frustrated you want to hit a wall. The engine is all slinged back up on the crane. I'm just about to take the engine stand away from it so that I can get the flex plate onto the engine before it's back into the hole. Once I got this thing sitting in place, 2 bell bolts tightened up, I kind of left it and went and had some lunch. I've come back out and got quite a bit done already. So the mounts underneath are tight, the dog bone's tight, the exhaust is tight. The rad's back in with everything on the bottom side all done up. Power steering pump is on. Starter is in, all the bell bolts are tight. The torque converter bolts are tight. So I'm getting pretty close. I think I'm right there that I'm going to sit the intake manifold on, because I've got the little recirculation pipe to go on, and there's a little bracket back there to hold the airbox. But literally I just got to start plugging everything in and bolt the intake on next, I think. Well, I am completely back together, maybe about an hour and a half later. Everything is hooked up, all the electrical's done, the fuel's hooked up, airway's in. I put the new ignition wires on. I've got a new belt on there, cleaned up a bunch of the plastic, new air filter. I've got the oil in it. I've poured in fresh coolant. I've got this battery all charged up. I am just going to do a quick scan, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some codes in it that I want to clear before startup. And then I'm going to set up the tripod so you guys can at least get an idea of what happens when I turn the key. So I've just finished doing an ECU scan. There's actually no code stored in this thing in the ECU or the TCU. So I thought for sure the check engine light was on, but maybe it wasn't. That's a good possibility. But everything looks good. I've just double checked everything, looking over my connections. I am ready to turn the key. So cross your fingers. Exhaust shield rattle from jarring it around. Just this one front shield, just rattling around. Probably pry them off of there. Gonna shut it down. I want to check the oil. I am gonna run it again just to make sure I get all the air out of the cooling system. It's got a tiny little bit of noise to it, nothing significant, nothing I can actually pinpoint, and without getting that exhaust shield taken off or tightened up, it's kind of hard to identify if there's anything else actually making noise. But the knock is certainly gone, and it runs very well. There's no check engine light. The exhaust cleared out right within a minute or two, and it looks really clear right now. So I'm just going to double check the oil, and then I'll end up running it again. It's, you know, get all the air out of the cooling system, and then I might even take it for a quick little toot down the road. Yeah, it's running really well. I'm gonna call this 100. Very pleased. And while I spent, you know, probably a good portion of this day doing this and getting it finished up, it's just coming up on, well, we're getting close to the dinner time anyway. There is no leaks. I've had a good look over everything. The exhaust I still need to tighten up, but I definitely got all the air out of the coolant and capped that up. So that just goes to show that you can put one of these blocks into these cars. It's not going to be an issue. And then from further reading, I also came across people using EJ251 blocks in these cars with AVLS heads. You just can't do the other way around, because the AVLS block has domed pistons and they will interfere with the other valves of the earlier heads, I guess, because they're a little bigger. I'm really glad that this thing worked out the way that I hoped it would, because now I have another good running car, and basically all the things that are left for it is front and rear brakes, which I have here already, and we'll get into those videos next. And then I'm going to do a good cleaning on exterior and interior, load the winter wheels onto it, because I'm probably going to just drive this thing for at least a couple months, and that way I'll make sure the engine's all good and kind of have a really good winter car to drive. So yeah, if you like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, and if you're new here and you haven't already, please consider hitting that subscribe button for me. Leave your questions and comments further down below, and I will see you in the next one.